Live from Fort Defiance on Capitol Hill, just yards from the Supreme Court and the Capitol itself, right across from the plaza. This is War Room Pandemic, episode 66 on the podcast, with now almost 4.4 million downloads. We're on the John Fredericks Radio Network, on americasvoice.news, the streaming service for the Trump movement, now Dish Channel 219, on Newsmax TV, FM 99.1 and FM 103.9 in Chicago, in the Chicago suburbs. Also, nexus.org throughout the world, IRRS, shortwave, medium wave, and AM radio, all the way from northern Italy, Germany, Eastern Europe, Russia, India, all of South Asia, the Middle East, Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, and also subtitled later the day in Mandarin on G News, blowing through the firewall so that the people in China get the true story of what's going on in this global pandemic. My co-host, Jason Miller, Jack Maxey from the War Room. We're going to have Raheem Kassam, our colleague, in later. Maria Luisa Rossi Hawkins with a live update on Italy. Maura Monahan talking about the CCP. This is the CCP virus. It's not the Chinese virus. It's not the Wuhan virus. It's the CCP virus. We're going to be talking all about this. We got other Wall Street experts. Another brutal day, looks like, in store in the world's capital markets overnight. The Federal Reserve is throwing everything onto the fire right now. Another QE program, buying bonds in the secondary market. We'll get to all that. We do both the pandemic, the economic crisis it triggered, and the financial crisis that came from the contagion of that combination of a pandemic and an economic crisis. A lot to talk about. We're going to talk about the hammer and the flattening and all of it. The White House, Governor Cuomo, New York City. But honored to be joined now in our open. You remember from War Room Impeachment, the show that preceded this for months and months and months. One of the best voices we had, the kind of that practicality of mid-America and common sense, was Senator Mike Braun from Indiana. But what got me most, and the reason we're going to have him on the show, he's dealt with epidemics before. He's dealt with epidemics in his life as someone that was a farmer at one time and owned property out in Indiana and knows how badly this can be. So, Senator Braun, thank you very much for joining us today.
Good to be on, Steve.
Now, first off, guys, jump in here. First off, how's the safety of the Senate? We hear that there are five senators, I think, now in either quarantine or self-quarantine. What's the status of the Senate?
So, Senator Paul, who tested and because he thought he might, due to travel and people he's been around, he's asymptomatic. But Senator Mike Lee and Senator Romney were sitting at a table, I think, and felt that they needed to, out of responsibility, self-quarantine. Rick Scott, who I don't think has had any symptoms, he comes off of quarantine today. And then trying to think if there's another senator. I believe that's it currently, because with Scott, I think there were 4 out, unless there's someone else that cropped up that I'm not aware of. I think it does beg the question of why we're not getting this thing done, and all of us practicing what we're preaching about, social distancing and probably getting back to our home quarters and, get this deal done. Disappointed that we're playing footsie with it. Kind of like, reminds me of the USMCA process, which was a lot different, but that got delayed as well. But I hope Rand is okay, but that shows you how it could start to cascade through the Senate and, of course, the House as well.
Senator, this is Jason. Oh, Chuck, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, Senator. I just wanted to ask you a question because we've been getting a lot of questions about it from our listeners. The Senate gym was closed when Senator Paul was using it because of the coronavirus, and they're saying that various senators and staff members were using it anyway with the keypad. Is that true?
Do not know that. I think that if that were the case, it again would be that exercise of personal responsibility and common sense that, is disappointing when that doesn't happen. And I think that's kind of another thing. It's when you are immersed in a crisis like this, you got to be careful that you're doing what you're asking others to do. So I don't know an answer to that, so I can't tell you whether that's true or not.
Senator, this is Jason. Take us inside the room here. We saw last night, very disappointing, that Democrats, Chuck Schumer, the rest of the gang went and stopped this recovery package from getting through the $2 trillion we desperately need to keep the economy going. Overnight, we had a limit down from the markets. We're seeing right now the Dow is down, was about 273 at this very
with
second.
the Fed coming in hard with another quantitative easing and buying bonds, all of it going all in right now.
So take us inside the room. I saw Senator
Right.
McConnell wants to bring
And
the
I
Senate
think
back
it's also-
in for some
it's
votes,
also
but
reflecting that, yeah, I think due to the votes that we're supposed to take at noon, and I asked the question, how many? If there's a sequence of 3 votes, that could mean procedurally that a deal has been reached. If there's just 1 vote, that means we've probably got some time yet. And I think it's very dangerous for us to be doing this when almost all Democrat and Republican senators had things hashed out. And now you've got Pelosi and Schumer interjecting and trying to, I don't know, extract other stuff. I heard even throwing things like infrastructure in there and Social Security reforms. We need to stay on point and get this done because there are already businesses hurting big time and people that have been out of work.
So, Senator, this is what I want to ask. So take us inside the room. How do we unfoobar this? Because we have a situation where senators, look, we have 4 or 5 that are holding themselves out. I don't even know how many can be in the same room. I mean, is this ultimately the top staff from McConnell and the top staff from Schumer get in a room all 6 feet apart and start figuring out specific nuances? Or is this an active conversation between the Schumer, McConnell, but then also Pelosi over on the House side to see if it's something they'll go through? How do we get this even to the point at noon where we can start this series of votes and even have a compromise with the Senate in disarray like this?
So believe me, those mechanics are in play, and the individual you didn't mention would be Mnuchin, from the administration. And this has all been happening to the point where most of us as senators had our answers to questions delivered last evening, and then all of a sudden found out there were some roadblocks, especially when you've got Speaker Pelosi saying they may want to do their own bill. That is preposterous because they don't even have anybody back here. And that to me is that blatant kind of playing politics. When you say something like that, that wouldn't even work practically. So I think that there's going to be enough shame on their part that it's going to force them into, especially since we all know as senators, Democrats and Republicans, that have been working on this in the 4 or 5 different task forces, that there was basic agreement until we heard from Pelosi and then Schumer.
Now, are you saying that you don't think Nancy Pelosi is going to have a separate bill and want to go to, enforce that through, have a vote and go to conference? You think she's going to compromise and basically agree with whatever Schumer's got in here so there'll be one bill?
She has no one here. All the House is back home doing what they probably should be doing, is self-quarantine until we get through these next 8 days at least. So they don't have any way to do that, Steve, because that was just, I think, probably a slip of the tongue, because if you know how the mechanics work here, that doesn't even make sense. Kevin McCarthy said the same earlier today when I was watching him on Fox. So that doesn't make what we've got here. We did the same thing for them on phase 2. We amended with one practical amendment, plussing up unemployment insurance, which is probably the thing that should have been done in phase 2. They voted against it and then injected it as their main piece in the Senate package, which we all agreed to as Republicans. And they are, from what I'm understanding, talking about nuances and details on how the Emergency Stabilization Fund would be used. And we've gone that direction mostly on making sure that you can't have stock buybacks and you can't increase executive pay. So what is holding it up now would simply be that you're trying to extract more stuff out of the process that is shameful in my mind.
Let me ask you, how, for the audience out there that are the shop owners, the entrepreneurs, what Marco Rubio says, the company's under 500 employees, how is cash getting to the American people? Because on Thursday, they're going to announce 3 to 5 million are now filed for unemployment insurance. How did the audience that are just regular citizens or people that own a dry cleaners with 10 workers, how does this bill, when it's passed, when did they start seeing cash?
Okay, so that's the disappointing part about not getting this done, because the quickest conduit to the people I'm most worried about, which would be wage blue-collar workers along with their small business employers, they would be getting access through plussed-up unemployment insurance immediately. That'd be the quickest way. This place is so slow and cumbersome that back in '08, it took 3 months to get checks out individually, in '09 to individuals. They can speed that up to 3 or 4 weeks. And when you hear about the $1,200 or $24 for a couple, which gets phased out between 75 grand and 99 grand of income, that's going to take 3 to 4 weeks. And that's doing it as quickly as the IRS can produce. So that's why it's so important to get, because unemployment insurance is going to be the quickest injection for the people that have been impacted most that don't have their jobs. And then secondarily, this puts not only through the SBA system, more community banks as well, to where these loans can go to small businesses that if they use it to maintain payroll will be forgiven almost in their entirety. So that's the 1-2 punch I was interested in. That help for the industries and sectors disproportionately hurt. That's the liquidity portion, which are loans, not bailouts, to companies that are 500 plus employees. So it's a good package overall, and why it's being held up for whatever Pelosi and Schumer are doing it for, they'll need to explain that.
Senator, this is Jason again. A lot of the deplorables out there, the mega folks, people in Indiana, hardworking, don't want to take government assistance. Unless it's an absolute last resort. They want to get back to work. They want to put food on their table for themselves. They might not be rushing out to file for unemployment because they think they're holding out hope right now. This morning, Federal Reserve Bank St. Louis President James Bullard said that the U.S. unemployment rate could hit as high as 30% this quarter. So I think there's going to be another wave that's coming on the unemployment front. How is the Senate going to work as we talk about future packages if folks are self-quarantining and heading back to the states and districts, and we got to come back and do another package, say, 3-4 weeks down the road from now?
We need to be nimble. We need to be entrepreneurial in this approach, and that's not the Senate. That's not the federal government in general. This was caused by government rightfully trying to put the body blow and tamping down the disease. And I've been out there, I think, as the first senator that says we got to be real careful, especially after 15 days, that by flattening the disease curve, we don't flatten the economy. And that means that where we have seen so far, here are a couple observations. Population densities, New York especially, thank goodness the president cut off travel from China and Europe. That was the first big move. It's made this a lot less serious than what it could have been. We need to, like anything you do,
Senator Braun,
when you've got a crisis, you learn every day.
Senator Braun, can we keep you over through the commercial break? We got to jump for a commercial. We want to hear your answer for this. Can you stick with us?
Yes, I can. I've got a few more minutes. I'll stick around.
Okay, fine. This is War Room Pandemic. We'll be back, Senator Mike Braun, in a minute.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Live from Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. It is Monday, the 23rd of March, the year of our Lord 2020. Senator Mike Braun from Indiana, Republican from Indiana, continues to be with us. We know you got to go, Senator Braun. So can you finish this? I know you're very concerned about there actually being an economy that once we get through still exists. So walk us through, how do we do that?
Okay, graphic example. I had a hotel owner in Indianapolis call, 2% occupancy rate last week. It is that serious in the industries that have been impacted directly by this. That is why it's essential when it comes to putting liquidity in the system, doing everything and throwing the kitchen sink at this is important. And I really believe we're doing it because every week we go beyond the 15-day stretch. That's when it gets even more costly to keep the economy alive. So that would mean that at that point, we are going to have to be prepared, since we caused it here, to try to flatten the disease curve. Like I said earlier, without flattening the economy, we may need to learn again from what we hopefully get done today with what we might need to do again. I'm one of a handful of fiscal conservatives, but I'm also one of a handful of individuals here in the Senate that understands macroeconomics and microeconomics. These are going to test us in ways nothing else has. And I'm optimistic with what I've seen from state and local governments to using the National Guard now in places where we need to. We are doing all of that, despite what you hear on some of the media where they're still trying to needle Trump, for being slow out of the gate and so forth. I think, again, like I said earlier, the travel bans were crucial. That's why we're not dealing with a bigger crisis than what we've got. But once we get to day 16, that's when we really need to start paying attention, because that's when it gets more costly to keep the economic patient alive.
Besides microeconomics and macroeconomics, the reason we love you is you're a business guy. You're not another lawyer up there, although we love the lawyers. We just think we got too many. You're a business guy like Trump, Senator. You're also, though, and I remember this in a very early episode of a late episode of impeachment when we were shifting over to the pandemic story in January. You told our audience about you've actually dealt with an epidemic on your chicken. So you know the epidemic. Here's the question: has this 15-day Mike Pence deal, has that actually flattened any curve? Because we're going to have the Surgeon General on here, was on Today's show, that says New York is on the path to be Italy. And the math looks like we're 2 weeks behind Italy overall as a country with certain hotspots. Has anything actually been accomplished in flattening the curve in the last 2 weeks, to your mind?
Okay, and I think this might give some solace, allay some fears. New York is like Italy because Italy did not restrict travel, similar to what was happening early on. Since New York was the vector, the direction that most international travel is going to end up being in and around, that's why they're dealing with it the way it is. Look at the mortality rate. I was listening to an expert from Colombia that says we've probably got 5 to 10 times as many cases out there. And if you take that and put it on top of the known cases through testing, we're all of a sudden under 1% and getting closer to the flu mortality rate. And we've got to assume that whether he was right in 5 to 10 times as many cases out there other than we've officially recorded, that the bright side of this is that if we contain it, the mortality rate is going to be closer to the flu and not MERS or SARS. And that is a victory in and of itself. And to benefit from that, we need to keep the number of infections down. I mean, that's arithmetic. We're doing it. And I think that is a different approach in every state. In my state of Indiana, we have been socially distancing in a socially distanced atmosphere because it's sparsely populated outside of Indianapolis. Many states like a Wyoming and a Montana, they're going to have all the natural defenses. California is mostly a rural state by geography, so we need to take all that in mind. But until you see the ticker tape in the corner of the screen starting to show us good news, the national anxiety is going to remain. That's why I think it's a tricky balance between killing the disease and not killing the economic patient.
Senator Mike Braun from Indiana, thank you so much, and thank you for taking the time. A real friend of the show, and you're a great patriot, sir. Our folks love you, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That's a good, great Midwestern common sense, right? Stability. Braun's a special guy, really special guy. Of everybody up there, look, they got a lot of special men and women up there, but he's got that kind of common sense, Indiana, Hoosier State, right? Notre Dame, the Indianapolis 500, the Hoosier basketball, right? Doesn't get any better than that. Let's go. You want to talk about the Surgeon General? Let's talk overall about the messaging, about what happened yesterday and this thing. It's coming down to a question of, is the Pence 15-day hiatus, or I guess it's not really a lockdown, the 15-day, even for what they have official title for it, but the 15-day kind of social distancing, right? Phenomena. And now you've got governors in all these states that are coming up with their own policies. So we've now just had Michigan. So I think we've got, 9 of the top 10. I think Florida is the only one that hasn't, DeSantis hasn't jumped in here, although he's been up and down trying to close the beaches, right? And you've got some mayors, right, whether it's in Dallas or Houston or obviously in New York, that are taking more stringent measures, but it's kind of a hodgepodge. It feels like the way Italy was. You had guys in Lombardy trying to do some stuff. People in Milan wanted to get through Fashion Week, and then they shut it down. Rome did certain things. So it's got a kind of an Italian feel to it in that it's no real coordination or effort, guys kind of doing their own thing. And then you've got this new group, I don't say new group, but Bill Ackman, myself, others are saying, hey, look, the China model is clearly the model to look at. You got to get past this virus. And the way you do it, you lock it down hard. There's some period of time, 15 days, 30 days, 45 days. But we're also adding another component piece of this. And this is why I think Hilton and some of the other guys are not picking it up. You need to infuse the system with cash. The little guy, we can't have the economy fall. Obviously, you can't have a cure that's worse than the disease. You have to have a cure that's better than the disease. And this start of this bill is a start. But the reality is they're talking about cash not getting to people. Am I wrong? Not getting to people for a couple of weeks. So even the mechanics there is not going to solve it. And you got to infuse more cash into the system to make sure everybody knows they're not going to miss a paycheck. And all the small businesses are going to be able to make payroll.
Yeah, and Steve, you've made this very clear. We have this pandemic crisis, we have an economic crisis, we have a fiscal crisis, and everything has to be considered. Financial, excuse me. All this needs to be considered together. So the president's tweet late last night was, we cannot let the cure be worse than the problem itself. At the end of the 15-day period, we will make a decision as to which way we want to go. Here's the reality, folks. If there's one article today that I ask you to read, just one article. Donald McNeil Jr. in the New York Times has an article, "The virus can be stopped, but only with harsh steps," experts say. And I just want to read you a couple of lines from this. "If it were possible to wave a magic wand and make all Americans freeze in place for 14 days while sitting 6 feet apart, epidemiologists say the whole epidemic would sputter to a halt. Italy moved incrementally. Officials slowly and reluctantly closed restaurants, churches, and museums, and banned weddings and funerals. Nonetheless, the country's death count continues to rise. The U.S. is slowly following suit." It's a final line here. "It's an intimidating picture, but the weaker the freeze, the more people die in overburdened hospitals, and the longer it ultimately takes for the economy to restart." As Governor Cuomo said, we're past the point, and I agree with him, of monetizing these public safety decisions. Steve, you are exactly right. I'm going to say we have to smash the curve. This isn't slowing the curve or flattening the curve.
Got to hammer it. Got to smash it.
Hammer the curve.
And hammering the curve, you also have to simultaneously infuse the system with cash. We can't get to the other side of this and have nothing but carnage. Here's what we're going to have in the worst case. We're going to have a bigger balance sheet. We're going to have more debt. Guess what? We'll work our way through that. Okay? Interest rates are at zero. Okay? As much as I hate debt, particularly the national at 23 trillion, 24 trillion, right now it's not a first order problem. Right? You got to in crises, you have to be able to kind of focus on the signal, not the noise. The signal, not the noise. And you have to do this in threefold. Number one, you have to take care of the pandemic. And the way you do that is crash like the Chinese did. You had another alternative. The Koreans, we're past that. We've got Wuhan. We've got Hubei province. You've got to crash it. And that's a lockdown with a quarantine where you need a quarantine in New York and other places. That's going to take you 15 days, and not the 15 days we've just had. I mean hard lockdown. It's going to take you 15 days. Maybe it takes you 30 days. Maybe it takes you 45 days. But it doesn't take you 6 months. The guys right there said if everybody shuts down, you can do this. Now, simultaneously, nobody can miss a paycheck. No company can miss a payroll. You got to infuse it with cash. Number three, and they've already started this part of it, the Federal Reserve and the Treasury have to come together, merge the balance sheets, and start getting into the corporate loan, backing up the corporate loan business so we don't let a liquidity crisis become a solvency crisis. Bank of England already does this. ECB does this. In normal times, we wouldn't do that. But we have to do it now. And quite frankly, we'll adjudicate all this on the other side of this ditch we have to go over. We have to leap over. It's doable. This is not astrophysics. But you've got to take the hard measures to just drift this thing off, and we're going to have some hard numbers today, hopefully for the end of the show, about where we are on the curve. But don't listen to me. Listen to the Surgeon General of the United States. We're going to get back to all that. We're going to take a short break. Hashtag War Room Pandemic. Remember, the only thing you have to fear is fear itself. Donald Trump says nothing is inevitable. Nothing is inevitable. But that's because human action and human agency is what's going to get us past this. We got to get out of the incrementalism business. We're going to return in a second. War Room Pandemic.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Live from Capitol Hill, it's War Room Pandemic, episode 66 on platforms everywhere, and also you can get the podcast ubiquitous on all the podcasts. And please leave a review. Please leave comments. Now over almost 4.5 million downloads. Big audience. Also, hashtag War Room Pandemic. What I love about hashtag War Room Pandemic is at least 20% of those are blowing me up. And I love that. And if you don't like the economics, you don't like that, bring it. I haven't heard, by the way, of all the haters out there, I haven't seen any ideas that understand the capital markets, the underlying economics, all of it. But if you're going to bring it, bring it. I love, as guys know, I love nothing more than a good fight. I've debated every guy all over the world. I'm like the old Fresno State football team. Any place, any time, right? Okay. This is, I think it's Lenin or Marx, and it's apocryphal. I don't know if it's from them, but it's legendary from them. And I know all the small government conservatives love me quoting Lenin, but he said, or at least it's apocryphal, it's supposed to be him, there are decades in which nothing happened, and there are weeks in which decades happen. This is the 45th anniversary, or the 245th date in history on which Patrick Henry in my hometown of Richmond, Virginia, at St. John's Church, give me liberty or give me death. And I was wondering this morning when I was looking that up and going back and seeing who was in the audience and reading the speech again, if they could have ever imagined General Washington, who were in the audience, Patrick Henry, the 245 or 250 years after they did that the nation be in grips of a global pandemic, a massive economic crisis, a total financial crisis, and really testing the mettle and the determination and the grit of the American people.
You know, and these moments of extreme crisis also bring about the elevation of really showing the mettle of some of our leaders. And I think to Mayor Giuliani in 2001, the attacks of 9/11, they talked about his political career being dead. He didn't run for the U.S. Senate, so Rick Wilson never actually consulted on that race. But he became one of the greatest leaders of our generation, leading us post 9/11. You think about Governor Cuomo, who's doing a fantastic job in New York, who everyone said he was done. He wasn't going to run it. He didn't run in 2020.
They laughed at him on 20, not even on in the depth chart of the 20. And 12 of those were stone cold stiffs. He didn't make that traveling squad.
Didn't even make that. And now national Democrats are trying to figure out a way to bump Biden and put Cuomo in there. Look at 100%. A way that, say, a Bernie Carrick, who not many people nationally knew but rose to prominence following 9/11. We're going to have him joining us for our WABC show today at 5 p.m. Someone who
he's a guy that knows special operations, knows emergency services. I mean, he was the undercard of Rudy.
And also U.S. Surgeon General Jerome Adams, Dr. Jerome Adams, someone who I would have not been able to pick out of walking down the street, would have known who he was. We know who he is now. And he went on this morning on the Today Show. He went on Fox and Friends. He went on CBS this morning. He is a very effective communicator. He gets right to the point. This is about as straightforward and well-delivered as we can get. I'm going to play you a couple things here real quick.
I want America to understand this week it's going to get bad, and we really need to come together as a nation. I heard the stories that you were just playing, young people out on beaches. We see here in D.C. that the district set up a cam for people to watch the cherry blossoms. You look on the cam, you see more people walking around than you see cherry blossoms, and this is how the spread is occurring. And so
And so Dr. Adams, just to be clear, Savannah Guthrie basically did, hey, Dr. Adams, thanks for joining us this morning. He says, I want America to understand this week it's going to get bad. We really need to come together as a nation. That is a stand and deliver. And you know there are going to be some people that are probably not going to be too psyched with the delivery on that one. And Dr. Adams, he spoke truth to power today.
Okay. Dr. Adams is a solid guy. He's a core part of the team. I think he's an Indiana guy, too. I think he's part of that Mike Pence group out there, Verma. They've got, because of Eli Lilly and others, they got a great understanding of the healthcare system. So many stars have come from there in this. Solid guy, core part of the team, right? And that really comes from the quote-unquote, the scientists like Fauci and these guys really. And by the way, Azar's an Eli Lilly guy. So this is a core part of the team. But he straddles both the science part as a Surgeon General and the policy part, and part of the Trump inner circle. So and this is what I think is confusing. When he comes up and says, this week is going to be bad, this is not a guy who lights his hair on fire. Every time he's been very reserved, right? This week is going to be bad. At the opening salvo, and she did not ask a leading question. It's kind of, hey, good morning, welcome to the Today Show. Boom.
And he did the same thing in his other interviews as well. It was like, hey, Dr. Adams, this week's going to be bad. And the reason why this is so important is we've been talking about here for weeks. The way the way things are looking, and Dr. Adams later addressed the comparison with New York City and Italy, but this week is when it's really going to ratchet up. And it's an important level set so people know what to expect.
I see two things out of this. Number one, I think it goes back to what I've been talking about from the start. You have to tell people the truth. The reality is, whether we say it's going to be bad or not, it's going to be apparent to everybody's eyes that it's going to be bad in 5 or 10 days. So we need to prepare people so they know what's coming. I think that's true nationwide. And also I think it's nice to have the professionals making these statements. If I were going to give an answer for messaging in the White House, these are the guys you need to have standing up there every day giving the press briefing. If the president needs to come in for some national policy direction that needs to be changed or explained, I think that's great. But I'd rather have the Surgeon General and Dr. Fauci explaining every day what's going on.
I don't, with all the chaos on Capitol Hill in this bill, I don't know if you start, because the news cycle starts on Sunday night. If you do a tweet, and then the Daily Mail picks up and has the lead story, it's the biggest news site in the world, right? It's 2x or 3x bigger than Drudge. And plus you got it up on the Drudge, I think in the Mac Daddy, that, hey, this week, we're probably going to take off whatever the lockdown is, not even a lockdown, the Pence program, because we're now going to be at the 15th day, or we're not going to let the economy falter, which nobody's talking about. You got to keep the economy going, but that's just cash. Cash substitutes for aggregate demand. You lose aggregate demand, you put cash, people have it in their pocket, they start spending it. But when your Surgeon General says it's going to be a bad week, you just know, if you look downrange, I don't think I'm going to be lifting anything coming to the end of the week. If it's going to be a bad week, you just got to have a critical path. You look down there. Thursday, you're going to have 3 to 5 million unemployment signed up, the biggest in modern history, right? Even bigger than 2008. You're also, with all this work of the Fed, I haven't looked at the thing is, you're going to have some big hedge funds start blowing up this week. Okay, there's going to be blood all over Wall Street. Okay, so some of the big some of these big funds are going to start, the leverage that they're going to start imploding. CalPERS has admitted they've lost $68 billion. The equity markets have shredded $25 trillion when you accumulate all the equity markets in the world, public and private. So you're going to have that convergence, right? Then you're going to have the convergence of New York City and the hospitals there, even with all the efforts we're putting in there. And you just have the Surgeon General say, this week is going to be bad. So I don't think the policy we're going to come up at the end of the week is that, okay, Pence, we did your 15 days. Let's just go about, let's go back and take care of the elderly. Boris Johnson's not doing that now. And he's now locked up in England. We're going to have Raheem on in the second hour. We're going to have Maria Louisa Rossi Hawkins on, Raheem. We're going to have Maura Monahan. We're going to broaden this conversation out a bit. But, you see England, you see these other guys trying to catch up and lock this down. Remember, the only thing we have to fear here is fear itself. We can get through this. People have shown in a lockdown you can get through this. All you have to do is have a bridging mechanism that gets you financially to the other side. That is called cash money. We have plenty of cash money. Okay? We have the full faith and credit of the American people. Now, do I want to load up with that? No. But this thing came out of nowhere, out of CCP. This is the CCP virus, right? We got to talk about how we're going to get our money back. That's a conversation for another day. Okay, now we have to get through this. We have to bridge that. So none of the little guys go to business. Nobody misses a paycheck. Nobody can't feed the kids. That's got to be done. That's a sine qua non, we say in the deal business. A sine qua non, right? First that, then the other. That's what Hilton, these guys are missing. You can't have this conversation. You're not going to let the thing implode. That's what they're working up on Capitol Hill. I don't think it's big enough. I don't think it gets there quick enough, but that can be solved. The last is that, and you've already had, they called today, I think I saw one of my guys sent me a $4 trillion bazooka from the Federal Reserve, right? The central bank of the United States of America and the American people, right? To make sure that this economic crisis doesn't trigger into a financial crisis, a liquidity crisis that then becomes a solvency crisis for these companies. And so I'm sorry if people and guys on TV can't keep this in their head, or they're not trained to do it, or they don't think about it. But to me, I'm not saying they ought to be very careful, but they maybe ought to select their guests so people can come on and actually talk about things. So to kind of organize this is quite complicated, right? But it's doable. It's complicated, but it's not astrophysics. And it's also not an immutable law of physics, right? This is not the second law of thermodynamics. This is what Donald Trump said. Nothing is inevitable. This is all about human action and human agency. We, with a stroke of the pen, can have the Federal Reserve lend to corporations. We've never done it. I've never advocated it. The Bank of England does it. The ECB does it. Bank of Tokyo does it, right? So, but you can do it. You can do it in a break-the-glass moment. I'm not for fusing $3 trillion into the system to make payroll for everybody and have everybody. Hey, I've never been for the direct payment, but guess what? We're in a situation we may have to lock down. I don't want to lock the country down, but when you see what has worked, and what's worked is there's not a fairy godmother that's going to come in here and wave a magic wand, and we're not going to have a magic drug, and we're not going to have a magic thing that the thing just goes away. That's just not the physical world. But if you take certain human actions, like they did the CCP, I'm no fan of, they're bad guys. They got to go. They're gangsters. However, when their legitimacy was, when it was on the edge, we started this show where they put Wuhan in quarantine and they put Hubei in lockdown, the size of France, 80 million people. It's the reason we started the show. I said, I don't know anything about biology, but here's what I know, that the toughest regime in the 21st century, and as bad as the Nazis and the Soviets and the Italian fascists, when the game is there that they could be blown out, they lock the thing down. And guess what? It worked. Now, we don't trust all of their numbers, but they are, as you know, Jack, and you're bringing up, they're starting to go back to work there. Look, are they doing it too early? Is going to be a second wave? It may be. But here's what we know. From the explosion they had where they started to look like New York City's on that path, they locked it down, and they got through it, right?
Well, I mean, to give our listeners an idea, this was the 23rd of January that they locked down Wuhan City, and a few days later, Hubei province. Today is the 23rd of March, and they've just announced that the people of Wuhan can start going back to work, and that they're going to allow foreign residents and residents from other places of China to apply for exit visas from
60
Wuhan.
days. 60 days, ladies and gentlemen. You guys are here from the beginning. 64 episodes ago. We've been on this story before anybody else in the world. And we're the only ones that cover it, all three things, the pandemic, the economic, and the financial, okay? Nobody does it better than us. Nobody's called this better than us. I'm not sitting here bragging. Here's my point. This is doable. This is doable, and it's very doable for the United States of America. It's going to be ugly, and we're going to have a little carnage on the other end. But we can work through that. Okay. Hashtag War Room Pandemic. Remember, if you're a hater, particularly on the economic side, you got to bring it. I want to hear what you hate. Okay? Give me your specifics, because I read it all. War Room Pandemic. Jason Miller, Jack Maxey, Stephen K. Bannon. We're going to return on the ubiquitous platforms in just a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Live from Capitol Hill, Fort Defiance. We renamed the fort. I kind of like it better, Fort Defiance. I'm a big fan of Fort Apache, but Fort Defiance on Capitol Hill. Hashtag War Room Pandemic. We want everybody in the show. Let's go to the second clip for the Surgeon General. We got so much to play this morning. It's just too much to cram into 2 hours.
Here he is from CBS.
Doctor, how far away from the peak of this do you think we are? Because some people have said it's not before the end of April.
Well, when you look at the China data, they were able to hit their peak and come back down in about 6 to 8 weeks. When you look at the Italy data, they're still going up. So we are somewhere between the two, and it's going to be up to everyone coming together to drive down demand to determine whether our curve bends in the direction of China in 6 to 8 weeks or whether it bends towards Italy. And unfortunately, we're seeing that New York is approaching Italy. Why? Because the numbers that you see of cases reflect what happened 2 weeks ago. And
full stop. I got to play that again. I want everybody at home to listen to this. This is not Steve Bannon. It's not Bill Ackman. This is a guy that doesn't lay his hair on fire. This is the Surgeon General of the United States. He's the guy that's dressed like an admiral that you see in back of President Trump all the time. He's been on TV a tremendous amount. He's a solid guy. He's part of the Trump team. He's not there to blow up President Trump. Sometimes Fauci gets a little ahead of the wagon train. And Dr. Fauci, who I really admire from the very first time on the Cat Show on WABC when this first started, Dr. Fauci has a tendency to be a little loose sometimes and kind of move the goalpost. The Surgeon General doesn't do that. So I want to replay this very important clip. This is what we call, ladies and gentlemen, a buried lead.
It's not before the end of April.
well, when you look at the China data, they were able to hit their peak and come back down in about 6 to 8 weeks. When you look at the Italy data, they're still going up. So we are somewhere between the two, and it's going to be up to everyone coming together to drive down demand to determine whether our curve bends in the direction of China in 6 to 8 weeks or whether it bends towards Italy. And unfortunately, we're seeing that New York is approaching Italy. Why?
We have said this now on the show for weeks, that we're on the curve to be Italy. In Italy yesterday, we're having Maria Luisa Rossi Hawkins, who we had on the very first day. They had the first 2 people in Italy. I think it was a month ago. 33 people an hour. 33 people an hour died in Italy yesterday. Okay? As their banking system starts to collapse. And guess what? That's bigger than the flu. This whole flu thing's a nonsense. By the way, go to hashtag War Room Pandemic, and I want you to give me, cite the person you know and the date when they died that died of the flu. That's an administrative checkpoint that hospitals use when you die of pneumonia. I've asked now 50 people, people very prominent with big networks, older in age, including my 98-year-old dad. I have asked 50 prominent people with big networks, please name me any person and give me the date of when they died of the flu. You know how many people I got out of 50? Zero. I know tons of people, been to tons of, I do funerals well. Weddings I'm not so good at, funerals I do well, okay? Not one person. That's an administrative thing. Do not give me the flu as a counter, okay? And there weren't 33 people in Italy dying of the flu yesterday. They're dying of this thing. And you got the Surgeon General. This is why everything's going into New York. This is why Peter Navarro yesterday, he's got planes coming everywhere. This is why the President of the United States has sent the Army Corps of Engineers. This is why they're building surge capacity, right? So we don't have you can get ahead of this crisis. You don't want to be Italy, but you've got to take some pretty dramatic action. The separation thing clearly in New York is not working. This is why Cuomo is all over de Blasio, right? This is why de Blasio is asking de Blasio asking the president for the Army. Right now, he's asking for technical support, right? Logistics.
Yeah, and to put things in perspective here, I mean, New York right now has 53% of the cases in the U.S.
They would be the 6th biggest country in the world, I think, with this pandemic.
Right, I believe Jack probably has the numbers memorized. I think it's right around 16,000 cases for the state of New York and about 10 or 11,000 that are New York City. But you look at the next highest state when you start talking about California and Washington, right around that 1,600 and 1,500 range as far as the number of cases. I mean, New York City is going to be the epicenter. There's a great story on this that popped yesterday in the New York Times. So this this is why you saw Governor Cuomo yesterday saying we're going to repurpose the Javits Center. We're now going to have 4 of these hospitals, and they're each 250 beds. And look, President Trump came through last night and said, you're going to have it. You're going to have these extra 1,000 beds. California, you're going to have 2,000 more beds. You're going to have the Navy ships. You're going to have everything that we can send to you. This is however, though, Steve, this keeps coming back to the flatten the curve versus smash the curve, drop the hammer to the curve. This is the fundamental debate that's in front of us.
I just don't think the curves are flatten. If I thought the flatten the curve could work, but when people talk about the flatten the curve, as Jack knows, now they're talking months and months and months. Governor Cuomo said 6 to 8 months. Even the president's team is saying several months, into May, into June, 3-4 months. I'm not so sure the system can take that. Okay? I'm not so sure the system can take that. I don't know if we can take it financially. I don't know if we can take it emotionally. It doesn't feel like an American move, right? Right now, we have to figure. The president's, a wartime president. You got to look at 2 archetypes in American military history: George McClellan and William Tecumseh Sherman. Okay, I'm from the South. I was, raised in Richmond, Virginia. We know the story of both of them. McClellan never took Richmond, and Sherman took Atlanta. Right, one way down there and focused on the thing and got it done. It dropped the hammer every day, and the other guy was organized and taking meetings and all this. We have to determine whether we're going to take the objective, right? And I think take the objective, we have to smash the curve. We're going to have to take some hard, tough moves, but a sine qua non of doing that, you've got to make sure the finances. You can't have people not get paychecks. You can't have businesses miss their payroll. That's not part of it. They're interlocked. They're both the same decision, and that's what we have to take care of.
Yeah, and this is, look, I think Americans can get behind a 30 Days to Save America plan. 30 Days to Save America. You go and do that, and you're going to see the patriotism in this country like you have never seen before. You're going to see the tough action, put the hammer down, 30 Days to Save America. People know that it's mentally, they're going to prepare for it. They're going to realize, you know what? We're going to hunker down here. We're going to be shut in for 30 days. We're going to live to tell our grandkids and our great-grandkids about this. We're going to do it. We have to take a dramatic national action like that to stop this thing, to not just stop this thing, to destroy this thing.
To defeat it. We have to defeat this, right? We have to.
It's an enemy and we're at war.
This is a war. He's a wartime president. They're the enemy. We defeat our enemies. We're just not going to linger on. If this thing lingers on, I'm not saying it's not going to come back and all that, but defeat it now. Smash the curve. Drop the hammer. War Room Pandemic, episode 66 from Fort Defiance on Capitol Hill, right across from the Supreme Court. Jack Maxey, who's kind of sitting over there stunned right now. Jack Maxey, have another chaw. Jack Maxey, Stephen K. Bannon will be back in a second.